Hey everyone, this is Derrick Bros of the Conscious Resistance Network. Today I'm going to talk to you about a new idea that I'm launching, something I want to push out there into the global consciousness of freedom seekers, and also it's going to be one of the subjects of my speech this weekend in New York City for Libertyfest, which will actually be taking place in Brooklyn. It is October 10th and 11th. This Saturday and Sunday in New York City. There's going to be a lot of awesome speakers there, friends of mine, and other people who I've yet to meet, and other just thinkers, activists, people pushing out their ideas about libertarianism, freedom, anarchy. And I'd like to give you a preview of what I'm going to talk about, and hopefully you guys can leave some comments, get your responses on what you think about these ideas. Essentially, my speech, which is called something like Mastering the Ego, building alliances and focusing on solutions, or something like that. It's a common trait of mine to discuss solutions. I'm always focused on solutions, especially because my strategy towards creating a more free world, the one that I believe is going to be most effective and works for me, and the one that I promote, is agorism, or just the idea of building counter institutions, building outside of the state, being involved in your community, localization, decentralization, these ideas. And that's a part of what I'm talking about as well. And if you're familiar with my work in this area of anarchist theory and libertarian theory, you may have heard of my book, The Conscious Resistance: Reflections on Anarchy and Spirituality. And then you would also know that my message not only focuses on agorism and building counter institutions, but also focusing on the internal battle, the internal struggle against our internal tyrant, which is where I would say one of the more important fights for freedom is taking place. It's not only the physical manifestations, the external manifestations of freedom, such as government and the state, that we have to deal with, because we most definitely do have to deal with them, but it is also battling ourselves, and I believe it is our internal battle that is taking place within all of us around the world, and it's allowing for some really fucked up things to happen in our world. Basically, there's a lot of hurt people and people who don't know how to deal with that, and we live in a world that is very manipulated, and it's purposefully manipulated to keep you from feeling like you're your highest self and being able to connect to that and being able to legitimately process your emotions and your feelings and to heal from those experiences and become stronger and better and quicker and this superhuman, if you will. And this is, of course, a personal decision that needs to take place within each of us. Ultimately, if you decide you want to go down this road of healing, it will happen. But we definitely have mechanisms within the media, within government, within education, all this propaganda that is designed to break down the individual, to get us to believe in the idea that we need to be ruled, that we need to have a state, and to put the collective above the individual. This doesn't mean that we as individualists don't care about the collective. It just means that in order for any collective and any true collective liberation, the individuals must be free and have freedom of choice to decide what they will. And then only through a conscious change, the conscious resistance, the conscious evolution that is taking place, will we be able to create a much more free world, a world possibly without government, or at least a much smaller, decentralized government, much different than what we know it today. So my solutions focus on agorism. They focus on the spiritual, internal awakening, conscious resistance. And along with that, my message is one of building alliances, which is important to agorism, but also building alliances between very different groups. And I've spoken before, we've done videos in the past on anarchism without adjectives, this idea, or panarchy, this idea, and we write about this in the book as well, this idea of bringing all different anarchists and people who are against authority and against statism, and it gets a little more nuanced once you look at it, but that's the basics of it, and get these people who oppose this authority and who are for freedom and for voluntary solutions and for working together, mutual aid, cooperation, all these ideas and the varying ideas that connect those. If we can work together, we can build alliances. I think we can really start to find ways where we can become not only a political force for those who choose to organize in that way, but really just organizing communities around the country, use ideas like freedom cells, which we've done videos and interviews about on this channel before. And I'm going to link everything below. I think I've mentioned Anarchism Without Adjectives. I'll put that video below. I'll put the Freedom Cells interview with John Bush below. And we're also going to talk more about agorism, and I'll put that video down below. So I focus on agorism, counter-economy, building outside of the state using finances and economic market exchanges that are outside the state in the gray and black market to compete with the state as it collapses. Also working on your own internal problems, that conscious healing experience and compassion and empathy for other human beings, applying that to your solutions. Being open, and this is where the mastering the ego comes in, being open and willing to stop assuming you know everything and that you know what's best for everyone. We may know what feels best for us based on our own individual personal experiences, but we also have to look into the psychology of why we think of the way we do and why other people think the way they do and what things may have happened to them throughout their life to make them view the world as they do. And short of constantly just beating people over the head and debating them, hoping that we're going to convince them that way, we can find ways to work together. Because there are those out there who are still looking and searching for answers, and I hope that all of us are open to evolving. I'm an anarchist now, but maybe my viewpoint will change. I hope not. And, I have to be open to that. We can't just be stuck in our ego and want to be right and refusing to admit, hey, my views change. I think it's a beautiful thing to evolve. So we have to remain open to learn at any age and from any person, any situation. Always open to growth and to learning. That's very important. But if we have what we believe is our solution, we can still come to others and we can learn through them. And maybe, we teach each other about our philosophies. That's why I am very interested in the history of the American libertarian, anarchist, individualist movement going back generations, and the history of anarchism itself and revolutionary movements and radical movements and how people organized and worked together. For the most part, there's a lot of division. I mean, really, there's so much division that has taken place historically through politics, like forever, but definitely in the United States and even amongst the radical groups, right? So I know for some of us, we sort of wake up from this mainstream political corrupt system and we stop believing the mainstream media, the old stream media, and maybe we do some conspiracy research, or we just wake up to the fact that the state is a lie, it's a myth, and it's one of the greatest dangers to human freedom. And you discover these new ideas of radically changing the world and new ways of looking at the world, and then you get into this and maybe you go to left anarchism, or you go towards right anarchism, or you go to socialism or communism, whatever your path may have been that you thought was going to be the most radical extreme answer in the very beginning. But what you find is you find division between all these different sects, and there's definitely reason for these divisions, but a lot of it is also petty, a lot of it is ego, as I was saying, and it's frustrating. So I want to bring back efforts to build alliances, and in my research, I found evidence of this in the 60s, and this is what I'm going to be really focusing. You guys are actually probably going to get more in depth than I could even talk about. I have a short talk at Libertyfest, 20 minutes, so it's going to be boom. Here's a little bit of history of the American individualist and libertarian movement, history of alliances, which I'm about to discuss with you guys, and then we'll get into people like Carl Hess and Sam Konkin, the roles that they played in that, and then hit agorism going on forth and how it relates to today, and finally hit them with drop your ego. So we'll see how well this is received. But I'm going to let you guys know a little bit about the Radical Libertarian Alliance, and this is not only going to be the topic of my speech, as I said, but this is a call for you out there who are interested in joining or creating. I don't even want to create a new group, right? There's so many different groups and ideas out there. This is just another one out there that I'm putting in the marketplace. And if people like it, cool. If not, then I guess it's a failed effort, but I will keep trying as long as I'm active as a journalist and as an activist and as a community organizer and as a free human to work with anybody I can, no matter how great our differences may seem. So the Radical Libertarian Alliance, this is what my call to action is. This is, in my mind, the truest sense of the word libertarian, which is, of course, respecting individual liberty and individual rights, and against authoritarianism, against authority. So we have people who start on that basic level. You respect the individual's freedom. Even if you consider your solutions to be collective, you have to recognize that the individual is... To have that collective, the individuals have to have rights, first of all, to work together, to have the freedom to work together, right? To organize collectively. So you have to respect that. and it seems obvious why we would be against authority, and unwanted authority above us. Now, if people organize in a hierarchy, I'm totally okay with that. I think that as long as hierarchy is voluntary and people choose to work in that manner, that's fine. I'm not against that, and I think it's a freedom that they must have. But we don't want anybody else coming in, establishing themselves above us and claiming themselves as some authority. So if you can jive with those ideas against authority and for individual rights and start there, I'm not even getting into economics, because libertarianism doesn't say anything about economics. In America we know it as Austrian econ, but I don't think that's intrinsic to libertarian ideas. That's why you have libertarian left, you have it's all over the place. So across the spectrum there is libertarianism. Your economic solutions might be different, your value systems might be different, but if we can agree on being against this authority and being for the individual rights, I think that goes along with that. Some would say the non-aggression principle, which I'm going to do another video about another time, because I want to break down the shortcomings of the non-aggression principle, because there are some, and ideas for expanding this idea, which I know may be heresy to some. But if we can start out this basis of being against unwarranted, unjust authority from above, and respecting individual rights to do what they need to as long as they're not harming another individual, then I think we can have a basis for all types of ideas within the political spectrum. And that is what the Radical Libertarian Alliance is. It's for those who are for these freedoms and against, I would say, mainly against electoral politics. But if people want to still go down that route, I'm not going to say I can't work with you on certain issues. So where does this idea come from? Where does this idea come from for a left and right alliance between left anarchists, left radicals, and right radicals? The idea has not been well received throughout history. One of the big dividing points would be those who believe in capitalism and those who don't, those who believe in property and those who don't, those who believe in violence as a solution and those who don't, and those who are against the state and those who are not. These are four areas of divide that I see: anti-statist versus statist, propertarian versus anti-property, capitalism as freedom, capitalism as slavery, violence versus non-violence. These are some areas of conflict among these different radical groups. But first, let's get into this. What I've found, as I said, there is not really a great history of this, but there was, for about 10 to 15 years, opportunities were present and people were trying. And one of the people leading the efforts was Murray Rothbard. So let me sort of set the stage for you. This is late 50s, early to mid 60s, on through the 70s. And at this point, the libertarian thinkers with Rothbard and his younger college crowd, they were working with the right, the old right, because the old right was anti-New Deal, it was anti-war, opposing foreign intervention of World War I and II. So those who were libertarian, freedom-minded, they worked with the old right, the conservatives, because that's where they felt like, that's okay, this is who we can line up with. The left is statist and just grew the government massively. We can't work with them. So that's where things were. Now, towards the end of the 50s and going into the 60s, into the Vietnam War, we have the Cold War and the Vietnam War, the old right started to become very supportive of, they were very much into the anti-communism, and they were also very into aggressing against Russia and supporting the Cold War. And then when Vietnam came, they were supportive of the draft and supportive of the war. So all of a sudden, Rothbard and the other, I'm using his name because he's one of the most well-known, and he's also, whether you hate him or not, and I don't consider myself to be a Rothbardian. I definitely respect some of his work that he's done. I also think there's a lot of shortcomings in his work, and there's errors in his thinking that people need to be called out, but it doesn't make all the ideas bad, because he may have had some character flaws. But Rothbard and others at this time started to realize they couldn't work with these conservatives anymore. That it was bad for them, and that's why you'll find a lot of essays back then, and I think these are relevant now. How you have the essays basically talk about why the libertarians should divorce themselves from conservatives and why that was a bad move. And I think you flash forward now towards 40 or 50 years later, and people started partnering with, there was this emerging Tea Party that was sort of radical because of people like Ron Paul, and then it got watered down, and a lot of big L libertarians were still trying to work with the conservatives, with the right. When you look at the right now, it's nothing but neocons. I mean, really, look at the people who are running for office, except for maybe Rand Paul here and there, who's libertarian-ish, or conservative realism is what he calls his genre of politics, I guess. But look at the rest of them. They're all neocons. They're all ready for war. And look at the left. The left is all ready for war as well. So let's go back to the late 50s, early 60s. People are gearing up and supporting the Cold War. Then you've also got support coming for going into Vietnam. And out of that time, though, the end of the 50s, beginning of the 60s, you started to have what would become known as the New Left. So the New Left was emerging. The old right was becoming all about the war, and you had Rothbard and the freedom seekers starting to propose the idea of working with the New Left. Even though there was vast differences in the economics of the groups, the New Left was anti-war, they were anti-draft, they were for the Black Power movement, they were, for a lot of ideas that those who were about freedom and libertarianism and anarchy on the right felt, like they had in common. So they decided to start working together. And one of the examples of this, in 1959, William Appleman Williams, he was involved, I think he may have been the editor for a journal called Studies on the Left, and Rothbard was also involved with this and would write, I think, a few times in there, contribute essays to the journal. So that was one of the first beginning things of this alliance, or this attempt at an alliance between left and right, radicals, anarchists, libertarians. In 1965, Rothbard, Leonard Liggio, and George Resch started Left and Right, the Journal of Left and Right, which was basically trying to do just that, find the issues that the left and right could agree upon. And it featured people like Carl Oglesby, who ended up becoming the president of the SDS, Students for Democratic Society, which was seen as more of a left group and did have some Marxist elements and communist elements in there. But Carl was a libertarian supporter, and he was very, seen Rothbard's ideas very favorably. So the two worked together, both in the journal, the Studies on the Left journal, and just trying to bring SDS together with those on the right who were libertarian, who were Randians, who were anarcho-capitalists, these types of groups together. That was in 1967. Carl Oglesby wrote an essay called Containment and Change, and as I said, he was involved with SDS and building alliances. In 1968, Rothbard wrote Confessions of a Right-Wing Liberal, which was really him reaching across. And at the time, you can see in Rothbard's language, he started to talk about the Black Power movement and was really trying to reach out to the left through his vernacular and through the topics he was talking about. One important thing I do want to say, and this is what I think is ultimately important in anyone who may choose to go down this road of creating a Radical Libertarian Alliance, is that we should work together, whether you consider yourself to be on the left, a left anarchist, a mutualist, a gorist, or even a Bernie Sanders supporter on the left, and working with those who are on the right, even though this spectrum of left and right is completely screwed up. We have to recognize that first of all. But wherever people identify themselves, if you find yourself willing to work together with someone, that is a great thing. But we have to remember not to sell out our principles in the pursuit of these alliances. So for those of us who refuse to use the state and are very much against statism, and we understand that agorism and Samuel Konkin, the New Libertarian Manifesto, talks about the importance of consistency in our means and ends, then don't allow yourself to sell out your principles in the interest of these alliances. I think that is a big mistake. We have to find ways to work together on the issues we can, but we should not sell ourselves out. So in 1968, the Journal of Left and Right ended, went 3 years, and then in 1969, Karl Hess, he put out this article in Playboy, The Death of Politics, which became very well known, and some would say sparked that generation's American libertarian movement. All of a sudden, it grew massively because of the work of people like Murray Rothbard, but also because of Karl Hess putting the ideas out there in the mainstream. In May 1969, the Radical Libertarian Alliance was created by Walter Block, Roy Childs, Rothbard, and a few others, and also that same year, the Libertarian Forum was created to replace the Journal of Left and Right. Columbus Day, 1969, the Radical Libertarian Conference, the first conference of its kind. And there's a history of this. I don't want to go too much into that, but do some Googling Radical Libertarian Conference, look up Rothbard, look up Karl Hess, And you can find an essay actually from Rothbard called 2 Steps Forward, 2 Steps Back, written in Libertarian Forum, November 1969, where he describes his experiences, and he saw it as a failure. And then also that year, 1969, at the Young Americans for Freedom Convention in St. Louis, this was a big moment in libertarianism where this conservative student group basically kicked out all of the anarchist libertarian members, and there was a draft card burning. It was a big ordeal. There was literally fighting from everything that I read and found. There was fighting between these students, and they all left, and that was another part of the attempt to work with the New Left, was to leave these conservative organizations. In 1970, there was a festival called conference called the Left and Right Festival of Liberation, and I believe there was also another attempt at a Radical Libertarian Conference. So you have a couple attempts there, and that's the end of the 60s going to the 70s. Around that time, that second half of the 60s, somebody named Samuel Konkin was involved. He was, I believe, going to college in Wisconsin and was attending the libertarian conferences and some of these national conferences, and he would go on to write and release this book, The New Libertarian Manifesto, which discusses agorism and the ideas of counter-economics. Now, even that idea, counter-economics, he was trying to jump in again on the counterculture, the new left, the new libertarian, so he was really trying to get these ideas there. And really, this book is one of the main that people would put in the left libertarian stream of things. I know some right libertarians hate the term left libertarian because they're so afraid of anything on the left. But I think in the truest sense, this book and other books like Markets Not Capitalism are true left libertarian positions that have more of a concern with the environment and with maybe social justice issues and feminism and gender than those on the right. But it still takes a libertarian position, as I stated from the beginning, of being against authority, against the state, and being for individual rights, but still finding ways to address those important topics. So, I've said a whole lot, and I got more to say. I really don't want to make this video too much longer. I'm going to be trying to suck this all down to his 20-minute speech for Libertyfest, but definitely I want to recommend checking out The Death of Politics by Karl Hess, because Hess was involved in, I didn't mention this, but the reason that that Rothbard felt like the Radical Libertarian Conference was a failure is in the second half, Karl Hess apparently gave a speech and got people all riled up to they were going to do a military protest, and a lot of the people left. The conference continued, but it was really divided, and people just had different ideas on how it should have gone, and you really had this battle of like academic conferences and people wanting to keep things on this academic level, and others who are more about rapping sessions and just talking, open discussion, and maybe it's just two different groups of the spectrum that can't work together, but I will continue to work towards this. Again, I can't stress the importance enough of the ego, mastering the ego, and understanding yourself, working on your inner healing so that you can have empathy and compassion for other people while you work towards your path of freedom. It's not going to look the same for each of us. We have to accept that. I'm an anarchist, but I don't want to try to force all of you into the anarchy world. I just want to be left alone to create the world I want. And you can do what you want if you choose to live under a state and pay for war, as long as you don't come after me. That's all I'm saying. So if you're on the left, if you're a mutualist, if you are a syndicalist, an anarcho-communist, anarcho-collectivist, I know that there are issues that those on the right who may identify as anarcho-capitalists, libertarians, anarcho-libertarians, or just individualist anarchists, and then everything in between, mutualists, agorists, transhumanists, all these different groups, and even you voters in the mainstream, Democrats and Republicans, I'm sure there are some issues that we can work on together. So even if you don't consider yourself a libertarian, I challenge you to rethink what you know about libertarianism and understand it in its truest definition, for individual liberty and against authority coming up from on high in a centralized position. So recognize the rights of the individual to organize and to do as they will without infringing upon anyone else's rights to do the same, and recognize the danger and authority above us without us putting it there. So think about those ideas and ask yourself, are you a libertarian? Could you participate in a Radical Libertarian Alliance? Because if so, do it. Start it where you're at. I'm going to push the ideas in New York City this weekend. I'm going to push them in Houston, and see who out there wants to work together and build. Thank you guys for listening. I appreciate your support. Please share this video if you found it interesting, and check the links in the description below for more information on these topics. I'll talk to you soon. Wish me luck in New York City. As always, if you can hear this, you are the resistance. Peace.